I wanted to ask you then, just in closing, what you think about the future of media, in the U.S. particularly, whether there, are there any sort of rays of light that are hopeful, or are we just heading still into a darker period until, I don't know what? How do you look at the future of media?
Well, I think that's a really interesting question. I think that it depends somewhat on how successful censorship efforts will be. When you have Twitter and other social media platforms basically deplatforming people, it's one thing when Alex Jones gets deplatformed, but when that same thing happens to independent journalists down the line,
Yes.
that could really hamper their ability to get their reporting out to the public. I think that one of the crucial reasons that there aren't more people in this kind of niche of journalism is not because people don't want to be, and not because they can't see. Because, I mean, like you said earlier, it's really easy to see through a lot of these lies if you just take the time to research it, even just a little bit. Right. Most people, but as you said, most people don't have the time and energy to do that. And those that do have some time and energy to do it, it's very difficult to make a living from that type of journalism, at least initially. And even when you look at, Whitney Webb, Caitlin Johnston, a lot of these figures, what they're doing is they are funded directly by their readers via Patreon and things like
Right.
that, which is fantastic. And I encourage people to support independent journalists in that way. But the career path is very different to something like working for CNN or a big news outlet, where, if you don't go with what your editor tells you to write, then there are hundreds of people with humanities majors who are lining up to take your place. Mm-hmm. So I think that the good news is that type of media, the New York Times, CNN, MSNBC, those legacy press outlets have very little. I think that there's very little public trust with those outlets nowadays. Right. I'm not saying there's no trust, but a lot of people really are turning away from that.
Yes.
And they are seeking out sources of news that are independent. I think basically it's a toss-up between how successful censorship will be and how much the public wants to hear independent voices. And I hope that that the tide in the future will shift, where independent voices become more widely heard. I don't know that will happen, and I think it really will be a battle against censorship.
I agree with you on that. I definitely agree with you, because these independent voices were coming over online media, and it's very easy to censor online media, and especially for the tech companies in our country, because we control most of the underlying structure for the whole world for that kind of media. So, that's not a very hopeful picture. I mean, I think that the hopeful side of it that you pointed out is that ordinary people have become more distrustful of the mainstream media. And so if something can happen from that distrust that leads to something new, that would be the direction that things would have to go to be hopeful. But, how could that happen if the censorship is going to be online? I don't imagine that we're going to go back to having our newspapers delivered into our mailboxes. So it's hard to say where any kind of independent journalism is going to get supported. But I'm glad it's out there for the time being, at least. And for a while, I think people thought, or people who are informed and were thinking hard about these things, that podcasts would help with it, but they can be censored too. So, it's really hard to say where some kind of some sort of light can be coming, out of the darkness there, or in the Leonard Cohen idea of there's a crack in everything and that's how the light gets in. I think that is the case, but sometimes it takes a long time for the light to get through the crack. And I think on this one, we may be facing a difficult time in terms of getting news out, or getting the truth, into media, so that people can discern what it is even. That seems to me to be the thing that we're facing.